Hi, this is Benjamin Curley. Thank you for joining this video. We will talk about a very important issue of any Model UN conference, uh, which is resolutions. Before we get going, I'd like to make a couple of general remarks. Um, as you know, resolutions are very, very important in any MUN because they represent the work that a committee has made. Um, However, at MIMUN, they intend a separate purpose as well, which is to show the realism of a simulation. As you know, many model United Nations are based around consensus building, and that is why most delegates, most committees rush to get into a resolution. Well, for us, it is very important for resolutions to be realistic. So um, we will not. We would not encourage you to rush into resolutions uh, because that would actually represent a consensus building, which is one of the features of MUN, which we do not encourage. So try to make your resolutions as realistic as possible, and that probably means that there will be quite a few resolutions per committee. Just another remark. We do not accept pre-written resolutions at our conferences, so make sure that all the work is made during the conference. Um, it will be a presentation with probably many new issues, so do not worry if your resolutions are not perfect from the beginning. We will be working on them throughout the conference and throughout this training, and at all times you will have a well-trained dais to help you during the conference. So what is a resolution to start with? A resolution is a substantive document. A substance means content. It means this is the core of the debate. Everything you debate, everything you will talk about during committee sessions will be resumed in a resolution. Um, it is therefore the result of the debate in a committee, and it is formalized by an official vote. All representative bodies in the world can deliver substantive documents. International committees adopt resolutions. For instance, meanwhile, legislative chambers pass bills and laws, but the principle is the same. Um, for you, those of you who are in a cabinet, for instance, you will not be treating or discussing or passing resolutions. You have other ways of taking actions. But most of you will be considering drafting a resolution throughout MIMUN. Um, but just so you know, it is all representative bodies have followed the same principle. Um, the vote needed to formalize a resolution varies across committees. For instance, some committees, as NATO, will require a consensus, while the General Assembly will require a simple majority of the quorum. Um, as mentioned before, a resolution shows the actions to be taken. These actions had been discussed throughout the committee sessions, and it is basically what the body decides to do on a certain matter. And it also depicts the feelings of a committee. So it's not only about what is going to be done, but also how the international scenario has reacted to this, how all countries see a certain situation. Don't forget, behind every action, there's also always a motive. And sometimes the actions taken by the committees of the United Nations will be based on a feeling of anger or enthusiasm or yeah. So it is important to understand that all the words you put formalize through a resolution are also the representation of how uh, the world feels regarding that issue. Focus on the language, and we'll be talking about language and the choice of words later on. because, as I said, they basically decide whether the resolution has been watered down and actually resembles a more timid uh, choice of actions, or whether it is a vigorous decision reached by a consensus of the committee. Um, Also, worth noting that resolutions are formal recommendations. Not most international bodies cannot propose binding decisions. Um, so that's why they are considered recommendations. Now, through soft power, it is that these recommendations are enforced. Um, that's why they are relevant, even though they are not binding. Um, and well, resolutions can have also other capacities when we talk about the actions that they take. Um, they can resemble a general statement or a directive to a specific organization. They can be the statement of a policy or an entire treaty, a declaration, or a convention. And so they can, you can basically shape a resolution around what you want to achieve. Um, and well, once a resolution is passed, it is the result of the whole committee. So not only um, those who drafted the resolution and not only those who voted for the resolution uh, are represented by the resolution, but actually the whole body is. Um, that's why we will see later the resolution is drafted and addressed by one body only in the name of everyone, in representation of everyone. um so carrying on, um we will talk about how, the steps to adopt a resolution, how we basically get to have resolutions. um before mentioning anything, I've got to say there can be, in theory, one international organization can passes many resolutions as they vote for. um, but we've got to think whether that would be realistic. Uh, for instance, resolutions could contradict themselves, and that wouldn't make sense. Also, would it be normally in a realistic scenario, blocks would get together, and you wouldn't have one resolution per member, but you would actually have only two, three, four resolutions representing each block. So remember, at MIMUN, we're focused on realism, and uh, that's why resolutions also have to be realistic. Well, the first step, it's obviously the debate. There will be 10, 11 steps that will guide us to a resolution. The first one is the debate. The session starts will be informal speech or opening speakers list or in a moderated caucus, and you as delegates will be debating all the time. Um, Based on what is debated, some of you will start drafting ideas. You'll be brainstorming what you discuss, what somebody hears. If you hear a fellow delegate uh, states a point similar as the one of your own nation, you could get together with that delegate and you can start putting your ideas down on paper. Um, by doing this, you are creating a working paper, which is the first step that will guide us to a resolution. The debate will keep going on. You'll keep going on. The working paper will be added, shortened, and so on. And you will present your working paper to fellow delegates, and they'll pick up opinions. You'll negotiate on it, and basically through debate and through sharing ideas, it is that the working paper starts taking shape. Once you are happy with a working paper, submit it to the dais. The dais will review the content and the policy. It has to be well written. It has to have all the parts that a resolution should have, and it should be realistic as well. Once the dais approves the working paper, um, you can motion to consider the working paper as a draft resolution. Um, the dais will assign a number to this working paper, and this number will carry on until will be assigned, will be attached to this document throughout the whole committee. So, for instance, you will submit the first working paper submitted to the dais, and the first, which is then approved, will receive number one, and then the next one will be two, and then so in an orderly manner. Um, so working paper one will turn then into draft resolution one, and that is the way that the body will address the document. Um, then, well, the motion to consider draft resolution only needs a second, and then you can formally debate the draft resolution in committee. Um, then there'll be you will try to the document is basically finished, so you will want to lobby for uh, the draft resolution you are presenting. You will want to whip the votes to ensure that when voted on, it is approved. Um, that's why debate keeps going on. There will probably be more working papers and more draft resolutions uh, at the same time. They may not be ready all at the same time. So use this time to get the votes aligned for your the improvement of the resolution. Now, um, before going to the next step, I want to go slightly behind a bit. Um, just to make sure that the competition of draft resolutions and working papers um, does not pressure you to submit uh, you know a document which is not up to the standard you would like it to be. Once we start seeing three, four, five working papers circulating around committee, we want to rush and submit it as soon as possible, uh, to the dais. Well, the longer the faster, or the more the least time you work on the working paper, the more time the dais will take revising it. um, be patient when the dais revises and evaluates the working papers, and if you want it to be approved quickly, make sure you submit a decent document. um, if applicable, you can submit amendments on the draft resolution. So maybe after the draft resolution was considered, and it was debated on, as point 8 establishes, you want to go back to it and change some things. Since it has already been approved by the dais, you have to have a formal procedure to amend. That means editing, changing the draft resolution, and we will talk about amendments and how they exactly work little way down the road. Um, Once the body feels that the draft resolutions are ready and to be voted on, and the different blocks think they have the enough votes to pass their respective resolutions, then you can motion to close debate, and we enter into the formal part of the debate, which is the substantive part, which is the voting procedure. All draft resolutions that were considered during debate will be voted on, um, and then whichever achieves the majority, or whatever the voting procedure is in the respective committee, will become a resolution. Only until then we have a resolution, and for instance, working paper one will turn into draft resolution one, and then eventually into resolution one. So, just to recap, what was what? Um, so, there was a part of sponsors. Every time I was uh, referring to you who draft a resolution, you who brainstorm to make a working paper, you who submit a draft resolution, I was referring to sponsors. Sponsors are uh, the writers of the draft resolutions. So every draft resolution will have a sponsor. Um, do you remember when I mentioned that the resolution belongs to the committee? This is why this it was very important, because many times sponsors think that the resolution belongs to them, as in my resolution. So once it is passed by the committee, it belongs to the whole committee. Sponsors are responsible um, to write it, and well, signatories are um, delegates that would like do not necessarily support the resolution, but that they would like to see it discussed. They think, okay, there might be a couple of interesting ideas. I am not fully on board, but let's see how it goes. So I'll sign it so it can then the working paper can be formalized into a draft resolution. Um, in total, you have to have 20% of quorum, um, adding up sponsors and signatories. So in a committee of 100, you could have 3 sponsors and 17 signatories, and that would be enough to turn working paper into draft resolution. Um, Small advice, or well, just a clarification. Um, a resolution has no limit of sponsors and no limit of signatories. Uh, a resolution with more sponsors means that it is more difficult to amend. We will refer to that later on, but it is important to keep in mind. I've seen many resolutions with 30% of the quorum sponsoring it, and that just means it is very difficult to amend it. Um, Now, what was what? A working paper is a document in which the ideas of some delegates on how to resolve an issue are proposed. So it is where you brainstorm and then you write them down and you start giving them shape. And it is basically what precedes a draft resolution. Once the working paper is good to go and approved by the chair, it turns into a draft resolution. A draft resolution is a document that seeks to fix the problems addressed by a Model UN committee, and if it is passed, it turns into a resolution. So the resolution is our formal document that has been passed and voted on by the international body and that addresses the problems or issues. So it is basically a 3-step job. You work on a working paper, for it to be approved into a draft resolution, and then you lobby for the draft resolution to be accepted as a resolution. Well, we will now continue with the parts of a resolution. Um, the working paper, the draft resolution, and the resolution have to be structured in the same format, which is the one I am about to present. So the first bit is the heading. You will give it a title. It can be any title. Normally, they are referred to the topic. So make sure you include the agenda item in it. For instance, if you are uh, discussing the agenda item A in DISEC, then and it's the first working paper to be submitted, then it will be referred as resolution A1. Um, but in that sense, there are no formal rules as to how a resolution should be named. The only rule is that each resolution or each working paper has to have an identity code. Then you will include the name of the committee, which is producing this resolution, the topic or the agenda item being discussed, the sponsors, and the signatories. There you will just name the names of the country. Then there comes a part um, called referred to as preambulatory clauses. So it's the preamble to what you are going to do. Um, it is the part of a resolution that describes previous actions taken on the topic and reasons why the resolution is necessary. It begins with a participle or adjective. And then we have the operative clauses, which is the part of a resolution which describes how the committee will address a problem. It begins with an action verb, decides, establishes, recommends. Um, I I will go deeper into points 2 and 3, and I'll give you examples about each of these clauses. Um, I would just like to say that resolution can be as long or as short as the committee wants it to be. It can have one preambulatory clause with one operative clause only, or it can be as long as an international treaty. Uh, and grammatically, it is also formatted as only one sentence. So there will only be one uh, period, one full stop at the end of the last operative clause. Um, in between um, the point 2 and point 3, you will have to um, introduce again the name of the committee. So I'll give you a quick example so you know what I am talking about. Um, Preambulatory clause would be considering ABC, the United Nations Security Council decides. So that is the basic structure of of a resolution, and it can be extended for pages and pages. So the preambulatory clauses relate to the current situation. You have to quote facts. You can have to specifically make reference to things that describe the existing context. This is to first justify the actions you are going to take, and then when somebody in history revise further in some years revises the history of our time and sees the actions that the United Nations body took, they will like to understand why they chose this. So basically a operative clause, the preambulatory clause, excuse me, answers the question why the committee is taking these actions on the matter. You can also refer to the existing resolutions, to the norms that are currently have taken place, to the efforts that have already been made in the issue, and you can also state the intention of the committee. Remember when I'm referred to the feelings of the committee and how wording changes the feelings and the tone that the committee has? Well, that is very important. Your choice of words will, um, for instance, differentiate how worried you are regarding a certain issue. Always use the ing form of the verb, um, and each preambulatory clause is separated by a comma. These are examples of preambulatory clauses, and I mean, use the ing form or an adjective. An adjective is also okay, grammatically speaking. And I'll just give you an example uh, about the to differentiate between the tone and the feelings of a committee. For instance, deploring um, is a lot stronger than realizing or recalling. Or for instance, determined will be stronger than alarmed. No, alarmed means that you know that the issue is happening and you are a little bit worried. You would like, because you are worried, you would like to do something about it. But determined is you've realized that you are worried and you are so worried that you want to do something. Um, Choose the words properly. These are only examples. You can use any ing verb or any gerund, any adjective, and also be original, be creative. Do not repeat every clause at all the time. Do not say considering, considering, considering. So now coming to the operative clauses. This part basically answers to the question, quote, what actions will be taken on the matter, unquote. And it's basically a list of the recommendations for action. So the body will recommend a certain set of actions. It will state an opinion regarding the situation. It will request other organizations or other member states to do certain things. Um, so it is basically what you want to do. Um, it will be used in an active present tense. It is separated by a semicolon, and it is important to underline the operative term. I'll mention that again in a minute on the next slide. Um, Now, it is across conferences, I've seen many resolutions that uh, have trouble stating the specifics of what you want to do. Um, Try to keep it as readable as possible. Remember, a resolution is one long sentence. So try to avoid having subclauses. Normally, you have one, one, two, three, four, five. So if you're if the action you want to take requires many subclauses, it means it hasn't been debated enough. It means that you have yet, as a committee, not found the way you want to approach the problem. Um, so try to make it as simple and specific as possible. Those two adjectives are not mutually exclusive. These are examples of operative clauses. These are the ones that have to be underlined. And for instance, invites and deplores are naturally very different. And this is why wording matters. If the Security Council states that they deplore a situation, it means they are considering it is a lot stronger than if they would use the word invite. So basically, with this, you could finish your resolution. But as we know, there are always little bits and pieces that you want to change, add, amend, and so on. So an amendment is a formal edit of the draft resolution that you have already submitted and that the dais has already approved. Um, all changes on a draft resolution have to be done on a formal manner. You cannot just edit them on your own, and they have to follow the following steps. Well, as mentioned, an amendment is a change or clarification made to a draft resolution. It can basically mean that you delete a clause, that you add a clause, that you change the wording of a clause. It can mean anything. Any member of the committee can propose an amendment, and there are two types of amendments. One is friendly amendments, and the other are unfriendly amendments. And this is where you will realize why it is not good to have too many sponsors. A friendly amendment is a change to the resolution that all sponsors feel is appropriate. So if you have 30 sponsors in your resolution, in your working paper, you will have to work with all 30 sponsors for their approval. If one and only one sponsor does not agree on the amendment, then it becomes an unfriendly amendment. And this is the change that the sponsor does not support. And for that, you will need to vote on the amendment. The whole body will have to vote. For more information on this, you can revise the substantive motions and to see the procedure of an unfriendly amendment. So this is where everything starts making sense when I speak about how too many sponsors are not good. Um, well, to bring the amendment to the floor, it must keep the 20% of quorum. So, for instance, if um, two of your sponsors do not support the amendment, you will have to substitute them by two signatories to reach the 20%, and the chair has to approve it as well. Well, thank you very much, and make sure you revise this video carefully and do refer to the staffing team in case you have any questions.